So, but before we get to that, let's talk about the new allegation of Russian Novichok use. This is something, and I'll go ahead and find an old episode of Foreign Policy Focus, Will, where me and you talk about the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. But this new case is a Russian. What do they always call him? Like the opposition to Putin. They made this
Yeah.
guy out to be like, I don't know. I don't want to say like a U.S. civil rights hero, but they really put him like in the category of some kind of like enlightened opposition figure, the normal alternative to Putin. Somebody who isn't a thug. And so we had this headline here from Moon of Alabama. The guy's name who was poisoned, Alexey Navalny, and Moon of Alabama says Navalny gets scribbled. In that he was poisoned with Novichok, this super, super deadly will that I hear, one of the most deadly nerve agents, 30 times, 40 times, hell, 100 times more deadly than sarin or Viet's gas, but yet everybody who gets poisoned with it isn't dying. So fill us in, I guess, a little bit on what's going on with the Letzi here, and then we could talk more about the Scribbles and how all this plays together.
Yeah, sure, sure. So, like, just in late August, you had, like you said, this guy Alexey Navalny. Started his aides started coming out and saying he had been poisoned. He was on a flight from Russia, on a Russian flight, and they had to do an emergency landing. He started feeling very ill, and they rushed him to the hospital, and where he eventually was put into a coma. I think he was even on a ventilator at one point. I think he's slightly improved since then, but like, yeah, he was very ill when he went to the hospital. Um, but 2 days later, he was actually flown to Germany after there was some dispute as to whether it was safe to move him and stuff. That they weren't sure if it was actually safe for him to do that kind of long-term travel, but they eventually did. But once he got there, these German doctors say they found this evidence that Navalny was poisoned with this particular type of nerve agent, as you're saying, Novichok, which is the same class of nerve agents used in the whole Skripal case, or alleged to have been used in the whole Skripal case in 2018, where this former Russian spy living in the UK and his daughter, who they ended up like very sick in the hospital, and allegedly poisoned by this super extra mega deadly Russian nerve agent that only the Kremlin could have. That was sort of like the presumption during that whole case. But now with this Navalny thing, you have the Germans like calling on Moscow. They're saying, hey, like this guy was poisoned, so you better explain how this happened, explain your position. And they haven't quite come out and said like, Russia for sure did this. But Merkel, was she the chancellor, I think, of Germany, came out and said something that like, Navalny was the victim of a crime and we really need the Russians to explain themselves. And the UK and France and the US have all kind of lined up behind them and issued similar statements saying, kind of implying that this guy was definitely murdered. And of course, Navalny's aides all along, like from the very beginning, from the very first, I think they were the ones who initially announced this. They've been saying all along that he was for sure poisoned. They say that he would like someone put something in a cup of tea that he drank at the airport before he got on this flight, and that's what happened. That's what they're alleging. Now, as far as I can tell, a lot of the facts here are kind of murky. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we just couldn't know. Like, we don't know what the German scientists and doctors have actually, what they actually have seen. So there's a lot we could speculate about, but just sort of approaching it broadly, like, there have been a lot of claims that the Russian government has like eliminated or poisoned or murdered. And I admittedly have not looked like super deep into these stories. So, I think it's very possible there could be something to a lot of these. I also, I'm also skeptical because there's obviously a lot of claims that are made about foreign states, U.S. adversaries and stuff that get pushed that, that never get proven. But just on the face of it, sort of, there's like enough allegations to me where like, okay, it's plausible that this guy was poisoned, that maybe the Kremlin is behind this. Just like governments murder for sure. Governments do kill people. I don't put it past the Russian government would be no exception. And maybe they do it even more than the average government, just based on some of these claims we have here. So like on the face of it, it's not that implausible that the government is maybe behind this. However, I think there's also reasons to be skeptical about this too. Like we should also think about the other side. And the first is the fact that you already pointed out is that Navalny is still alive. Despite being hit with this supposedly like super deadly, like you're saying, it's like the way that this thing was sold, this Novichok stuff, it's supposed to be like the tiniest little drop, a microgram can kill like a whole neighborhood or something. I'm maybe exaggerating, but that is sort of the idea, is that it's super, super deadly. And it was the same thing with the Skripals. You know, like you said, we're 3 out of 3, 3 for 3 now, where people have been victimized by this alleged Novichok stuff, and they survived and lived to tell the tale.
Right. And
So
just I think there was like somebody who they allege came into contact with the Novichok used to poison the Skripals, but like 6 months later, they allege that whoever poisoned them then put in like a what in the US I guess would be like a Goodwill donation bin. And
yeah,
then months later, somebody, it was like hidden in a perfume bottle, and somebody then interacted with it. And this person was somebody who they pretty much said was in poor health. I think at one point they called him like a vagrant, whoever this person was, and ended up dying from it. But as far as at least, Sergei Skripal, I don't think was like the model of health. He was a much older man. He didn't look like, he was a runner or anything. Not that he was like, morbidly obese or anything, but not just 60-year-old man doesn't look like, the pinnacle of health, and he lives through it, as well as his daughter, and now this other guy. It really raises the question of what the hell is going on here. And also, it seems like this is one of those things like using the word compromat, where it's just like trying to imply that it's the Russian government because it's a Russian sounding word.
Novichok, right? Yeah, exactly. It's a very like buzzwordy kind of term.
Right.
Um, and yeah, with the I'm sorry, am I right?
And no, I
You
was
want to say?
actually just going to jump in and say there, and it was a chemical agent that was, I guess, founded or researched by some guy in the USSR. But as we clarified on previous shows about the Skripals, he actually published how to make this, and it's just like if you buy a book, you could do it. You need like a very, very advanced lab. It's not something that anybody can make like in a high school or anything. But if you're the U.S. government or the U.K. government, or maybe an elite U.S. university, you would have the ability to like produce this. And Gareth Porter also detailed how some of this was sold off to some mobsters at some point. So it's not just that it sounds Russian and only Vladimir Putin could order people to drop it in other people's coffee. That's not what's going on here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the one of the people who did develop this in the USSR, he said that yeah, anyone with a relatively sophisticated lab, a commercial laboratory, university laboratory kind of thing, could produce this stuff conceivably. And like you said, he did like put out the recipe for it and stuff too in his book. Um, and I think also the UK and Germany, I believe they've even admitted to having small quantities of this stuff that they've
Right.
synthesized it just to like, compare in case they need to or something. And so it's certainly not the case that this is some like magical thing that only the Russians could possibly, they're the only ones with the recipe. Um, and I will say the whole Navalny thing so far, it's not quite as crazy as the Skripal case. Like there was so many crazy plot holes and inconsistencies, and the story changed a bunch. There was a point where they said that the Sergei Skripal had this Novichok on his hands, had bread that he was feeding to ducks, and he gave it to children, and the children ate the bread, and they were perfectly fine. So it's just like there's so many weird plot holes and inconsistencies where if this stuff's supposed to be so deadly, then why are all these people surviving it? Um, but then there's another thing too that like for the Russians, like let's just presume that like everything said about the Sergei Skripal case was true and that the Russians really did use this stuff. It's kind of odd then that they would use it again. That they would like they might as well then, and they not only used it again but then allowed Navalny to leave to Germany. They cleared that flight. So like they might as well have put out a press release saying that like we just poisoned this guy with our fancy Novichok. That it would seem like it would be more tactful or more intelligent to use a more common nerve agent like sarin or I don't know, something that couldn't just be
Right, or he was on
linked
a
to that.
plane, take down the plane. Like he could die in any multitude of ways that look less, suspicious than the Novichok.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like I mean, like his like even his allies are now saying that this is the Kremlin's autograph. And it's like, well, if it is, then that kind of should make you question like why they would do that and why would they put their autograph on this crime. Now, I've heard some people who are like really, hysterical about the Russia stuff. It's just, Putin's so brazen that like he's just showing that he can get away with anything. And I don't know, like, why would they bring this headache on themselves if they could, conceivably avoid detection? Why would they just like come out and do it? And if they're going to do it this obviously, why not just have a cop or something, just shoot the guy or something? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of just weird little inconsistencies that make me quit, like make you pause a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
And can I just point out, I think the biggest one
sure.
for me is they let him leave. And
Right.
so if Putin was going to do this and flaunt it, then they could have killed him in the hospital. I mean, the guy was in a coma. So I'm sure it
Right.
would, been nothing for somebody from the GRU to dress up as a doctor and go in there and stick something in his IV and walk. I mean, like
Exactly. Yeah.
that had to be absolutely possible if, the point was to kill this guy and for Putin to flex his muscles, shirtless Putin on a bear. Then I mean that's fine, but then you have to explain why they let him leave and go to Germany of all places. And then the last thing I'll point out is that Russia says that he was in a Russian hospital, so they have samples, and that none of the samples that they have test positive at all for Novichok. I mean that's what you would expect the Russians to say if they're covering it up, but
Right.
just it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, another thing too is I think Moscow is saying right now too that Germany has not shared their like results. Like they haven't shared their data with them. And like I think that was the thing with the Skripal case too, that they're just like, dude, show us what you have. Like we'll comment on it, we'll look into it, investigate and stuff. But like they're not even sharing what the last I read anyway. Maybe they've done that by now.
Not as far as at least 3 hours ago.
Right.
But one of the things else is that the OPCW, the organization designed to worldwide be the watchdog, the IAEA for chemical weapons and nerve agents and stuff, has specific dispute resolution mechanisms set up so that if this accusation is made by like the Germans, then they're supposed to present the evidence to the Russians. Like that's the dispute resolution mechanism there. And until Germany does that, it's just kind of like a wild claim they're making, at least as far as I see it. Now, I'm not saying that the Russians are going to take that and honestly analyze it and really find out what was going on here if they were doing something nefarious.
Right.
But at the same time, like, play by the rules of the game that you signed. And so but it doesn't seem like they're willing to do that. And so I certainly think it should raise alarms that this is some kind of operation. Now, this is the guy that seems to me to be the most prominent, at least in Western media, of like the Russian opposition figures. However,
Yeah.
I don't think he's all that popular. Now, I don't think he's
Yeah.
like Juan Guaido, who was unknown. I think probably most or all Russians know who he is just based on how much coverage he gets in Western media. I don't know how they couldn't. And he does organize rallies and events, and a few thousand people will show up to it. So he obviously like is able to generate some kind of following and isn't a complete nobody. At the same time, Nancy Pelosi's not a nobody in our society, but I mean, the lady who gets set up by her hairdresser isn't going to be president ever either, right?
Right.
So, um, you know, just that, and plus, I don't think this guy is like a reformer or anything. I think the West just sees him as a puppet and stooge. I think there's a feeling that, oh, this is the guy that's going to make Russia more liberal, and Putin has these, backwards ideas on gay marriage. And yeah, I mean, like, I, was grew up in St. Louis in 1990, and from talking to, or not talking to, but listening to Vladimir Putin be interviewed by Oliver Stone, I'm pretty sure that his views on gay marriage are pretty much what the like Midwest consensus was during the 90s. And so,
Right.
sure, he's a little bit backwards, but so was Hillary Clinton. And
Until like 2012 or something.
right, right. So it's nothing too crazy. And then I don't think this guy's any better on these kind of issues, at least as far as I understand. I think he's actually has said like more anti-gay stuff, or at least in a more vulgar way than like Putin has. Now, obviously, Putin has the reins of power and has done some anti-gay things, but just for the record, that it doesn't seem like there's a huge difference in the amount of liberalism Russians will experience under one president or another. And again, Putin is fairly popular.
Right. Right. And yeah, just another thing I would say about this, like another reason maybe for skepticism here. It's nothing definitive, but this Navalny guy has claimed he's been poisoned before. Like he's not. This is not the first time he's alleged that he's been poisoned by the Russian government. I think like last year he organized. You mentioned that he organizes these rallies, and he was arrested last year for like organizing some prohibited illicit march. Which to be clear, that's not. I don't think that's okay. I don't think that's a legitimate reason to arrest somebody at all for organizing a protest or something. Of course, not that similar stuff doesn't happen here with our like free speech zones and stuff like
Or
they're
in
uh,
Australia. They arrested
What's
some pregnant lady this week
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
for organizing a rally. And yeah, just to point out that like we're about to make quad NATO with Australia, who's doing this, and then we have other NATO targeted at Russia for doing the same thing.
Right, right. Yeah, but so when Navalny was arrested for this or organizing this march, he claimed he was poisoned. He like broke out in some big rash and he had to be rushed to the hospital. And again, he survived, strangely. I don't know why the Russians can't kill this guy for some reason. They keep trying. They had him in custody. They had him in a hospital. It's just, like I don't want to be too dismissive of it. Like maybe the Russian government did try to poison him. Maybe they are incompetent. Governments are murderous and incompetent. Those are two things you can say about governments for sure. But like there are just some weird things like that kind of give me some pause. Um, Another thing, the last thing I think that just like is kind of weird is there's a photograph of Navalny in the airport at the very moment he's allegedly taking a sip of this poison tea. And that just to me, that just seems weird, dude. Like what, how is like maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe someone just snapped a photo of him while he was taking a sip of this tea, but it just seems too perfect. Seems like a perfect like little photo op thing. And oh, here's Navalny taking a sip of the poison tea that Putin, gave him or something. So I just think there's a lot of weird little things that start to line up here and just make you ask, like, is this like such a clear-cut case? Like the German doctors are saying they're for sure absolutely positive that there was poison used. And I'm not really in a position to like question that. I mean, I don't have any medical expertise. I don't know what evidence they have. But like just looking at some of this more circumstantial stuff, there are some things that give me, that make me question this a little bit.
Yeah, no, certainly a lot of holes in this plot. The last thing I just wanted to mention was in that Moon of Alabama article, and I think Bernhard does a pretty good work, over there most of the time. But sometimes he'll say things that I'm not sure I'm completely on board with. And this time he mentioned that possibly almost, and this isn't his, but just to explain, like Putin gets involved in Syria, so the U.S. tries to do Ukraine. This could be the U.S. failed in Belarus and is now looking to stir up some trouble in Russia a different way. That didn't seem, I don't know, entirely accurate to me, just because I don't think the U.S. really made a push in Belarus or had the opportunity to do one at
Right,
all.
I agree.
So, I think that's where that kind of falls flat. But I don't know. It's an interesting theory, and it's definitely something to think about. Hey, these neocons hate losing. That's why they, are now all Democrats. And so it wouldn't surprise me if, one track doesn't work, they try to get Trump to go on another one.
That's right. I mean, we have like what, like over a dozen intelligence agencies. So it's a big government. There's a lot of people in there who might, be trying to do these kind of plots. So
17, well, all
17.
17.